Hello and welcome to Simple Life Philosophy. I'm your host, Ed Raby. This is the channel where you follow me along on my journey to find a simpler philosophy of life that leads me to a life that is both gives me both peace of mind and some productivity, and follows along a path where it's easy to understand and easy to execute. Today is an episode, July 2nd, 2023, of the Sunday Stoic, and this is the Sunday post that I do where I talk about Stoicism, and this is the very first Sunday Stoic. So we're going to be trailblazing a little bit here today. And today I want to I've talked many times in other videos about one of the first principles of Stoicism is some things are in our power and some things are not. Today I want to talk about living according to nature, because Stoics are big ones for living according to nature, because it goes back to that original principle. The idea of there are some things within our power and some things that are not. Well, how do we differentiate? How do we make the differentiation of what is within our power and what is not? And the Stoic would say, listen, you have to understand that there's a certain nature to the way things are, and if you try to go outside the boundaries of that nature, you're going to be engaged in a realm where that is not within your power to change. Okay, and so by staying within the context of what is natural, living according to the nature of the universe, the nature of human beings, what you end up with is the ability to say, okay, within that framework, I have the ability to change things here. Okay. For instance, a kind of a simple but maybe silly example is if you're going to say, I'm going to go and learn how to fly, okay, using my arms. I'm going to flap my arms and learn how to fly. Okay. A Stoic would say, well, that's fine that you have that idea, but is that within the nature of your power to do that? Can you flap your arms and actually fly? And the answer is no. And so that is outside the realm of nature. It is not human nature to fly. We have to come up with things such as airplanes and other craft to help us to do that. Okay, we have learned through our technology how to learn how to fly. But within our own framework, within our own selves, within our own bodies, it just doesn't exist. And so if you can see there's a line where you've crossed that line and said, okay, this is something that is not according to human nature. Human beings don't have wings, so they don't fly. Okay. Then you have, so the Stoic says, okay, but what is within human nature? Well, let's say I instead have the goal, like I have a personal goal right now of I want to lean back out and get back to the kind of weight and feeling of health that I had at the end of the summer that I had right prior to COVID. And so I'm trying to do all the things that I need to do to get there, to get that feeling back again, because I felt really good. I was leaned out. I didn't have a lot of fat on my body. It was just a really good moment. And over the last month, I've made some progress, but it's like, I want to make more. That by August 31st, I want to step on the scale and see 258 or less. Okay, and have that same feeling of feeling good about that. And I'm starting to get the good feeling. Okay, I don't know about the weight. I only weigh myself like once a month. So at the end of the month, and I'm due here in a little bit, but that is a goal, however, that is within my nature. Okay, within human nature. It is okay to set goals about fitness and health and weight and things like that, because those are within our control and our ability to control. So that sits inside of human nature. Now, the Stoics were, in a more broad sense, they were talking more about the human nature of how we are rational creatures compared to the rest of the creatures on planet Earth. And we are also social creatures. Now, we're not the only social creatures, but we are, in a sense, the only social creatures that combine our social ability with rationality. Um, we have language. We learn to communicate in such a way that it doesn't necessarily follow that we're always acting on instinct. We We also act on logic, reason. And the Stoics are saying within the framework of reason and within the framework of society, we're trying to build a good and better society within that framework. We're not trying, however, to change the nature of human beings. We're not trying to change necessarily the nature of society and how society rules function, the basics, nuts and bolts of how society functions. As much as we have changed society over the years, there's still some basic parameters that people abide by. There's rules, there's manners, there's certain things that people expect out of each other that remain. And those are what the Stoics would consider inside human nature. That if we're going to be beating our head against the wall if we don't respect the nature of the way things are and try to change it within that nature. I'm going to use an example that might be a little controversial, but I really view the extreme right and extreme left in politics and religion to be people that try to change human nature. They're trying to do things and get people to do certain things that when you really look at it, it's like it's kind of against human nature. I mean, the religious right, I grew up in a denomination that didn't want the teenagers to have sex before they were married. I'm going to tell you that as I look back and on my youth group at the time, there's probably 10, 12 kids that went through the youth group. I am fairly certain that none of them were virgins on their wedding night. Okay. And that is because to me, when I look back at it, that's a rule that's fighting against the nature, the sexual nature of human beings. The moment we start hitting puberty, the moment we start hitting adolescence, there's a desire to procreate. And if you don't engage that with realism and realistic nature, you're going to have a problem because you got to look at certain things and just, you know, okay, we're going to have these kids, they're going to have their hormones firing and they're going to want to have sex. Wouldn't we want to educate them on actually how that works? And wouldn't we also want to give them some safeguards such as birth control and other things that actually might help them? But the religious right doesn't want to do that either. I always found it interesting when I was growing up that the Catholic Church, who wanted you to be on virgins on your wedding night, also was completely against birth control, and thus pregnancy was all over the place. It ended up being a real problem for them in certain countries, particularly where there was AIDS in Africa, because on the one hand they're preaching this, you know, keep it safe, but the nature of that culture and the nature of that society was just not the way to do that. And AIDS spread because they wouldn't allow contraceptives. On the other side, on the left, we often have what I would call social actions that go against human nature too. Uh, I know we look at certain aspects of trying to change society, and recently I was looking at some of the legislation that people want to pass where they want to make it crimes to do certain things. I want to go back a little bit, and this may still be it, but the idea of a hate crime was kind of silly to me, okay, because most crimes, I get what they're talking about. They're talking about something based on race or whatever, religion or whatever, but it's like, um, why do we add that on top of the other crime that actually was committed? Just call it the crime and give it the maximum sentence. And I think what ends up happening is, people that want to pass laws end up complicating things. And when you look at some of the laws, there's just no way to do them. Um, I don't know, for instance, recently, the state of Michigan legislature House has passed if you misgender somebody, you're going to face a fine. And I'm like, how's that going to work? You look at the prohibition laws like drugs and alcohol and all this other stuff. Has it stopped anybody from following their nature to get the things they want? So to me, people on the left who believe very strongly in government and law to change society, they really need to make sure that when they pass those laws, that are you going to be able to enforce this? And is this even realistic to assume that human beings can even do this? And eventually you begin to realize that a lot of times we pass legislation that just doesn't work. And I think the Stoic simply says, now, before we do this, is this going to conflict with human nature? And if it does, then maybe we need to reconsider it. Is all a Stoic would say, is maybe we need to stay within the confines of human nature. Of course, the Stoic wants to stay within the nature of the universe. I kind of gave the example of flying and things like that with your arms. But that's also coming to an understanding of who we really are as human beings, which is a very humbling experience, in my opinion. Um, I think Carl Sagan was the one who coined it. We're a little blue dot in the middle of an insignificant solar system and an insignificant part of a galaxy that's in an insignificant part of a huge universe that we can't even begin to fathom how mind-blowingly huge it is, like Douglas Adams would say in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And yet we think what we do is so flipping important. And when we really look at following according to our nature, part of that nature should be humility in the eyes of the universe, that we're not all that big, and what we do is not all that important. It's funny, all the great conquerors in the world have literally fought over specks of land that, from a universal standpoint, are so minuscule they're not even significant. And that's kind of, when we look at the nature of things, realizing to the extent to which we can change anything. There's a whole bunch in the universe that we're just never going to be able to change. And there's very, very little that we can change. So we kind of take those two things and we put them together and we end up with something that can be changed. And, you know, keeping it humble within the nature of things. And that's how we start to determine what can indeed be changed. If we're trying to cut against the nature of human beings and society, if we're trying to cut against some of these other things that are in the universe, we're kind of engaged in folly, and we're better off working within those things to try to change things according to the way things actually work. And so a Stoic is interested in learning how things actually work in society, with people, with the universe, so that when they try to initiate change in what they can change, or they try to influence change, they actually focus on something that can be done and will be effective because it follows the nature of human beings in the universe. And I find this concept, hard to sometimes wrap around, because we could spend all day arguing what nature is, what is natural, but that's not what we're really talking about. We're talking about what is possible given the nature of things to be changed. And it becomes a much bigger question. I don't know if I'm going to come up with any answers today, but I do realize that now, as I look at certain political, religious, social systems, how people are advocating for change. And there's a lot of times I think they're flying in the face of human nature. A lot of times they're flying in the face of societal nature, and it's not going to work. And many times they're just engaged in stuff that the universe doesn't allow for. I remember I was working one day and I saw somebody wearing a teacher, "I reject your reality and substitute my own." And I thought about that for a while. I said, wow, that person basically believes in magic. Here's the thing about Stoics and the living according to nature. We accept reality, and we don't try to substitute it with our own. We simply understand that no matter how much I would like to magically think that reality is different, it's going to be what it is. And instead of fighting what it is, what the Stoic is saying, let's understand the reality of things, work within it, and make changes within it that will actually be effective. I kind of think that's my thoughts for the day. I guess I'm more interested in what you think. There's a lot of things to unpack here. There's a lot of things to really think about. I just don't know how a lot of people just don't pick up on the idea that if you're trying to change the nature of humanity, society, or the universe, you might be engaged in folly. Okay, you might be engaged in something that's going to waste your time and your emotions and not actually get it. And wouldn't it be better to understand the way human beings and work within that and thus change society with their help because they follow after their nature? And I think the latter is more preferable, and finding and understanding how things really work and then working within that seems to be a much better choice. Well, thank you for stopping by. This has been Simple Life Philosophy. I've been your host, Ed Raby. As we've journeyed today into the world of Stoicism on the Sunday Stoic, I want to thank you for liking this video, sharing it with your friends. If this is your first, second, third time here, and you subscribe to the channel so you get all the content as it's released. Hit that notification bell for sure if that's your goal. But always remember that there's a nature to the universe that you can't change, but there is things within that nature that allow you to change other things. So take that thought with you and move forward with your life. Try to find something simple, a philosophy of life that's easy to execute, easy to understand, and work within it. Thanks once again for stopping by. You have a very enjoyable day, and I'll see you next time.